Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Holy FaceTime. Tonight it's December 5th, and I want to talk to you about Venerable Louis of Granada. I discovered him a while back because some of his writings are in Divine Intimacy. Sometimes they quote him, and he did a beautiful quote one time, I remember, about the Holy Face. So anyway, I decided that I would look him up and look up his writings and see what more he had to say about the Holy Face. And I was really quite amazed at what I found. So I want to share those quotes with you. But first, I would like to share a little bit about his life, and because it's important to the era that which he lived in and which formed him, right? So he was born in 1504 and died in 1588. He was born in Spain. Paralleled to a remarkable degree the greatest era of Spanish Empire, that the empire known as the evangelizer of half the world, the hammer of the heretics, and the light of the Council of Trent. Louis himself is known as the writer of the Spanish Empire. He was born only shortly after the famous year of 1492, when Spain had, under King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, defeated the Moors after 8 centuries of Moorish occupation and oppression in Spain, and financed Christopher Columbus' momentous voyage to America. These were the times of Spain's intense exploration and missionary activity in the New World, and of the Council of Trent, 1548 to 1563, and of the great Christian victory over the Turks at Lepanto in 1571. The end of this glorious era is marked by the great defeat in 1588 of the invincible Spanish Armada off the coast of England, an event which signaled the beginning of the end of Spain's brief but glorious reign as a world power. This was also the very year which Venerable Louis died. But during the early and mid-16th century, Catholic Spain gave the world many priceless gifts. Not the least of these were the books of her renowned son, Venerable Louis of Granada. So Venerable Louis of Granada was born to Francis Sarria and his wife, whose name has been lost of history. So this couple, they moved to the Spanish city of, what was it, Granada? Yeah, the Spanish city of Granada, and in 1504, Louis was born, and he later on changed his name to Louis of Granada after he became a priest. But anyway, in 1509, his father died, leaving him and his mother reduced to poverty at the age of 5, right? So they were supported by alms from the Dominican monastery. A few years later, while he was engaged in a street fight with a boy who had insulted his mother, Louis was discovered by Count de Tendela, mayor of Alhambra, who was impressed with his courage, and the Count took Louis under his patronage. Thereafter, Louis spent many hours on the balconies of the Alhambra. Thus, in addition to his other education, his soul was fed by the magnificent beauty of the surrounding countryside, fueling that deep love for the beauty of nature, which was to be a hallmark of his thought and writings for the rest of his life. When Louis de Sarria reached young manhood, he turned his path towards the religious life, and at the same Dominican monastery where he had begged alms as an orphan child, the convent of the Holy Cross, he received the habit of friar preacher on June 15, 1524, to the joyful tears of his beloved mother. A year later, he made his religious profession. At the convent of the Holy Cross, Friar Louis, or Fray Louis, as he was called, undertook the rigorous Dominican Ratio Studiorum, a review of Latin, and then 3 years of philosophy and 3 years of theology. Among the texts used were the works of St. Thomas Aquinas. Louis de Sarria was brilliant in scholastic disputations, and he had no equal in mental capacity, his application to study, and the exact observance of monastic life. Now, soon after he was noted, he became a really noted preacher and teacher, and he was sought after by many, including he won the attention of the Empress of Portugal, I believe, or the Queen of Portugal, and he became her confessor. And he was, a couple of times, he was named order for the Dominican order. He was named as preacher general. And so it was 1552, Queen Catherine of Portugal, the sister of Charles V, selected him as her confessor and advisor. In his many, many years of writing, he wrote many, many books. In 1554. So the 16th century was a time that was most turbulent in the history of the church, and a time whose terrible legacy of heresy and apostasy is still with us today. But Louis Granada, on the other hand, was a voice of true Orthodox Catholic reform. He showed how grace is essential in the life in Christ, and how the Christian must receive the sacraments and pray in order to obtain the necessary grace of God. Thus, by reading Fray Louis' true picture of the Christian life, the 16th century Catholic, as well as the Catholic today, is protected against many errors and given true and powerful spiritual food. His soul is protected against man-centered humanism, against the error of external justification, without an inner transformation into holiness in the soul. The error of religion is as being something entirely interior and independent of laws and ceremonies, and the error that the Christian need not expand an effort to grow in the grace. The teaching in his works is firmly orthodox and completely Catholic. In his 35 years of writing, Fray Louis produced 49 works, and there can be classified into 5 categories: spiritual theology, apologetics, hagiography, sacred oratory, and translations. Some of his books are masterpieces of spiritual theology. These are the Book of Prayer and Meditation, as well as one of his books that best loved and best known for is a manual of prayer for countless souls. It's called The Sinner's Guide, first published in 1556. And I just opened it up and read a few lines out of it. It is absolutely amazing. Anyway, so Louis' books have been translated into 25 different languages, including Syrian, Arabic, and Japanese. In addition to the European languages, there have been some 6,000 editions of Fray Louis' works. In fact, it is known from tales brought back from the missionaries that the Japanese version of the Sinner's Guide was one of the bulwarks that sustained the faith of the Japanese Catholics during 2 centuries of terrible persecutions. The works of Fray Louis were included in the precious cargo brought to the New World by the Spanish missionaries, and these missionaries even translated some of Granada's works into the native Indian languages. St. Rose of Lima, too, loved the books of Fray Louis. She had them always at hand, and her favorite was the Book of Prayer and Meditation. In one of her struggles with the devil, she protected herself by reading this book, and the devil became furious and snatched the book from her and threw it onto a rubbish heap. Rose remained unmoved and certain that the Lord would return it to her, as he indeed did. Other famous Catholics who have read and loved the works of Venerable Louis include St. Vincent de Paul, St. Louis de Marillac, St. Francis de Sales, Cardinal Berulle and Bossuet, St. Charles Borromeo, Louis of Lyon, and Jesuit of the Barnabite Orders. St. Teresa read Louis' books. St. Teresa of Avila read Louis' books and commanded her nuns to do the same, and she credited the Sinner's Guide with having converted over millions of souls. In some religious rules and constitutions, the works of Louis were mentioned as almost obligatory for spiritual reading for the novices. There was no bishop in Spain in the 17th and 18th century who did not eulogize, recommend, and even grant indulgences for reading the works of Fray Louis. St. Francis de Sales urged the bishop-elect of his acquaintance to read the works of Louis Granada and to treat them as a second breviary, and he advised this man to read them slowly, beginning with the Sinner's Guide. On December 31st, 1588, in the bare and humble cell at Santo Domingo, where monarchs of the world had visited him, and it was obvious that Fray Louis' lamp of life was almost extinguished, with tears of joy he received the last sacraments. The novices knelt at the door to his cell for a last farewell, and Fray Louis sensed the approach of death, and asked that they place him in his coffin. Then at 9 in the evening he breathed his last and exchanged the counting of years for eternity. So wow. So you can tell just by that little bit, I've only read you portions of it, of his bio, and I'm going to leave the link for this bio. But you can tell that this man was just amazing and highly sought after in terms of his preaching, and his books are very well renowned. So let's get to some of those quotes on the Holy Face. Now, this is what I found from the Summa of Christian Life from Venerable Louis of Granada. This is what he says about the child Jesus in the temple. Externally, the doctors saw only a boy, but they sensed something superhuman about him. A sharpness of intellect and meekness of the heart are often manifested in the face and the eyes. So divinity shone through the youthful Christ, as the sun reveals something of its splendor when covered by a cloud. Therefore, with good reason did the doctors marvel and ask one another, what type of boy was this? What wisdom he manifested? Whose son could he be? And how could he have learned so much in such a short time? In another instance in the book, he writes, in this manner, for the chastisement of men, God placed before them his divine likeness in the face of his Son, so maltreated and disfigured that if men would not depart from their sinful ways by reason of warnings and punishment announced by the prophets, surely they would perhaps be moved to abandon their sins at the sight of the divine figure in so pitiable a condition. Therefore, God first laid hands on men, but then he laid hands on himself, meaning his Son, which was the last thing that he could do. And although it was always a great crime to offend God, after the sight of the sorrowful Christ, it is not only a great evil, but the greatest ingratitude and cruelty. Pursuing the meditation on this mystery, in addition to the hatred of sin, you can derive from it great motives for confidence and trust in God, considering that this pitiful figure, which is powerful enough to move the hearts of men, is also powerful enough to move the heart of God. What image could be more efficacious to soften the eyes of God than the bruised and bleeding face of his Son? Here, his justice is satisfied, his honor is restored, and he is given the service which befits his greatness. Then realize how much more certain you are of mercy from the Father when you present this figure of Christ than Pilate was when presenting him to the Jews. So we can see in this line here where he says to us, I'm going to repeat this again, that God, considering this pitiful figure, which is powerful enough to move the hearts of men, is also powerful enough to move the heart of God, What image could be more efficacious to soften the eyes of God than the bruised and bleeding face of his Son? Here his justice is satisfied. Now, this is what our Lord said to Sister Marie de St. Pierre almost 300 years later in 1848, when he said to her that nothing is more efficacious to God, to appease God's justice, than to offer him the holy face of Jesus. So we can see here that, these writings from this Dominican were very profound. Now, one more quote. By our gaze, we force God to see us. Looking at him, we make him look at us, too. And this look is the cause of all our good. Then we present ourselves to him, and we begin to speak with him face to face. And thus we receive remarkable influences and radiance from his presence. Whoa. Again, here we see here in these words, we see a likeness to the promise of God giving us the radiance and glory of his face because we adore his face, and just astounding. So I couldn't wait to share these beautiful thoughts from Venerable Louis of Granada. And I will leave a link to the Sinner's Guide, and I'll try and find that link to the Summa of Christian Life, because I found it on archive.org. If I can't find it, just go to archive.org and type in Summa of Christian Life, or type in Louis of Granada, and it should pop up. But I'll try and find the link, and I'll link it to you. So until next time, I wish you all a blessed evening, and until next time, blessed be his holy name, and blessed be his adorable face. God bless you all. Bye now.